Well, you guys took a big risk taking me out of the hospital in Toronto, which nobody recommended. The psychiatrists certainly weren't in favor of it. And taking me somewhere as foreign as Moscow and then attempting this, generally unadvised treatment. It was all surreal.
Yeah, it was terrifying.
And when I woke up, so as I said too, that was complicated by the fact that I had developed pneumonia in both lungs. But when I woke up, I was first catatonic and then delirious. I can remember the delirium that lasted a whole day, consisted of a sort of dreamlike hallucination that I had been kidnapped by.
You were delirious for 9 days? 9 days? Yeah. 9 days. You remember the last day.
Yeah, I remember that I was kidnapped by people, oddly enough, who lived in Florida. And they were like very rural backwoods people. And
Florida tree people.
Florida tree people, yeah. And that they were going to, the leader of this little gang who kidnapped me were going to kill me because the leader was going to kill me because he wanted to impress his girlfriend. And it was a very, very vivid dream that I had while I was awake. I knew I was in the hospital at the same time. That was just one of the... And I also remember that when I first woke up, I was irate because I had been... My hands had been secured to the side of the bed because apparently I was tearing out the IV tubes that I was connected to because I didn't want to be in the hospital. I had no idea why I was in the hospital or where the hospital was or where anybody I knew was.
We had, to back up a bit again, we had agreed when you were in the hospital in Toronto, like our whole family had sat down and agreed that the best option was this rapid detox in Moscow. And you'd been part of that discussion. But when you woke up after the detox in Russia, you couldn't remember any of that.
Right. I remember being really angry with you when you first showed up because there were very limited visiting hours, but I didn't know that.
It was this, oh man, it was so awful. It was, we ended up in like the outskirts of Moscow in a clinic for severely ill people.
Yeah.
And it was like Soviet-esque guarded. So the visiting hours were 2 hours from 4 to 6.
And you guys were driving how far a day to come and visit?
It was like 2 hours each way.
Right. And in
Moscow
the deep
winter.
of winter, in rough traffic, in bad weather.
Yeah.
To visit an ICU that was full of people who were in very rough shape, including me.
Oh yeah, you fit right in when you first got there. And at first it was like oh my God, we brought Dad to Moscow and destroyed him.
Well, that's what the doctor told you, wasn't it? One of the first ones said that.
Oh yeah. Andre, I couldn't even, like, there was one day that was so bad I couldn't go in. And Andre went in and they said, why are you here of all places, in Russian? And Andre said there was no one to help him in the West, which there wasn't. We looked everywhere, right? And we tried 2 clinics and talked to multiple psychiatrists and none of them could help. And she said, great, you've brought him here to die. So, and that was, the scary thing about the hospital you were in Toronto is you had pneumonia that wasn't picked up until we got to Moscow. So when you arrived in Moscow, you had a fever and pneumonia in both lungs. And so when they sedated you...
and they intubated me as well.
They had to intubate you during the sedation because of the pneumonia. So we weren't getting care anywhere, and getting off of benzodiazepines almost killed you. And the place in Russia managed to stabilize you, but it was... Yeah,
to some degree. Like I didn't have the akathisia was much reduced.
Yeah, when the benzos were finally... So they did some plasmapheresis as well to get rid of the benzodiazepines in your blood, because the half-life of benzos are so long that even when you stop taking them,
of that particular kind, particularly.
Yeah, it takes a really long time for it to get out of your blood. So one of the things they did when you were under was plasmapheresis to get rid of all the benzodiazepines. So when you woke up, the only good thing that had happened was you weren't taking benzodiazepines and you weren't akathesic. You were totally screwed, but you weren't akathesic.
Right, yes, and that was a great relief. And then we went to a rehab center for a while in Moscow that was less medical and more physiotherapy oriented. And for a while I couldn't type because I couldn't remember how to put my hands on the keyboard. I couldn't walk up and down stairs because I couldn't see the stairs properly. I couldn't do up buttons. And one night I got up to use the washroom and then came back into my bedroom and I couldn't remember how to lay down. I tried for about 40 minutes. I couldn't remember the sequence of actions that would enable me to lay down. So this was probably 2 or 3 in the morning. I ended up calling for a nurse so that the nurse, who was a very helpful person, could come in and tell me how to lay down. So that was very strange, kind of cortical blindness. So I stayed in there for 2 weeks? Mm-hmm. And then we went to Florida where we thought it would be sunny and easier to recover, which it might have been. But when I was in Florida, my anxiety levels I wasn't akathesic most of the time, but my anxiety levels were unbearably high. And that finally got so bad that I had family members there who were taking care of me. You were there, of course, and Andre, but also my parents, my sister, some friends. Tammy came for a while. My son came for a while. But it got to the point where it was obvious that just the care of family members, no matter how well-intentioned, A, wouldn't be sufficient, and B, was just too much to ask of people. The responsibility was too great. And so that's when you and Andre had been communicating with this Serbian medical clinic for about 6 weeks, something like that. And they had been quite helpful.
5 months.
Okay. Well, this is partly why we're doing this together, is because I don't know all the facts at hand.
Yeah.
But they were helpful.
They were helpful. We, Andre managed to get in touch with this clinic in Belgrade where it's not, at least people who are treating you, it's not run by a psychiatrist, it's run by an anesthesiologist, which seems to be how you need to be treated.
Well, it seems to be working for me at the present anyways, and that's the best we've got. And it's pretty good because I felt better. Probably I felt better. See, there are things about the benzodiazepines too that I didn't really understand until I began to decrease their use. I had become quite isolated from my family members.
Yeah.
It was most noticeable, I would say, in my relationship with my son. But it was like there was a barrier up between me and people.
It was noticeable.
I attributed that to the strange twists and turns my life had taken in the previous 2 or 3 years, because there was no shortage of strangeness on that front. And then also I had a strange muscle weakness that plagued me. And I now realize in retrospect that was all a consequence of benzodiazepine use. So using it, well, this is part of the reason we're doing this podcast or video as well, to let people know these are very widely prescribed drugs, and they are not safe to take for more than 2 weeks or a month at the absolute maximum. And if you take them longer than that and you end up addicted, or dependent, which means that you'll suffer withdrawal symptoms on their cessation, you are going to be one sorry person. Some people, have a better time of it when they stop their use than others. But enough people have a terrible time so that it's an absolute, it's a medically induced epidemic. It's a complete bloody catastrophe.
Yeah.
It's probably worse than the opiate epidemic, and that's really saying something.